everyone, thank you so much for pressing play. So I am super duper excited. This past week I was reading the book of Ruth and I was so blessed by it, and it made me want to ask ourselves this question, especially my single ladies. Do we want to be like Ruth, or do we just want a Boaz? Right? Do we want to be like Ruth, or do we just want a Boaz? And I say single ladies because I remember when I was single, I was always like, oh, I want a Boaz, a godly man, a man who loves the Lord genuinely. That was my thing, right? Like, oh, I want a Boaz. But I want us to examine our own hearts. First and foremost, before we look and see, is he a Boaz? Are we a Ruth? Genuinely a godly woman who loves the Lord, and through loving the Lord has been growing a characteristic of a godly, noble woman. Before I start, I want to give us a quick summary. So the first chapter starts off with Naomi, and Naomi loses her husband, unfortunately. She becomes a widow, and then after that, she ends up losing both of her sons. And so I apologize. My dog decided to take a nap in the middle of my video. Banks, what you doing? Banks. Say hi, Banks. Watch him be even more loud. Alright. So she's left with two of her daughter-in-laws, one being Ruth, as we know, the other one being Orpah. Not Oprah, Orpah. Because I used to always confuse that, like, oh, Oprah got her name from the book of Ruth. But no, her name is Orpah. So anyway, as I was reading, it was so encouraging to see the dynamic between Naomi and Ruth. So Naomi was encouraging Orpah and Ruth to go back to their native land, right? To just go back to their mother's home. So it says that Orpah kissed her and left, but Ruth, it says in verse 14, clung to her. And I love how one of my study Bibles says the Hebrew word for clung, which is debeke. I don't speak Hebrew, but I love trying to pronounce those words. Debeke means an expression of loyalty and devotion, and they point out how that same word is used in Genesis 2:24 when God tells the man that he should leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one. Hold fast is that same Hebrew word as clung. And so I thought that was beautiful because it's like Ruth had a loyalty to her. Like, she just felt that in her heart, a loyalty to her, a devotion to her. She didn't want to go back. She wanted, and we'll see what she wanted. Verse 15 and 16 in chapter 1, Naomi said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. That is so beautiful, right? Because she's just like, no, your God, the God of Israel, that's going to be my God. I want him to be my God. I want your people to be my people. And I was just like, wow, you just see her love, even her heart's desire for God. And so we already see some of her characteristics. She's loyal. She is a woman who wants to go after God. She could have said, no, I want to follow you because, I just want to follow you and that's it. But she's like, no, I want your people to be my people. I want your God to be my God. She had a heart, a different type of heart there. She didn't want to go back to her native land and worship all these false gods. No, she wanted the God of Israel to be her God. After that, we see another characteristic. It made me think about Proverbs. In a couple of scriptures, it talks about the sluggard, the lazy person, right? This is the opposite of who Ruth was, because as soon as they got there, it says, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. And she went to look for work. She ends up in a field that belonged to Boaz. And when Boaz asks one of his men who Ruth was, that's in chapter 2, and it says, then Boaz said to his young man, who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. She continued working from the early morning until then, and he made sure to point that out. So it must have been a long time, and she only took a short rest. And so after that, Boaz, spoke to her, and he was so kind to her. He said that he has charged all the young men not to touch her, no one to harm her in any way. And when she's thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Like, he was just being super kind to her. And then in verse 11, we see more of her beautiful characteristic when it says, Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native lands and came to a people that you did not know before. And so just him even hearing of her reputation, and it just shows her characteristic, and it reminds me so much of the Proverbs 31 woman, because in Proverbs 31:23 it says, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among elders of the land. And so in the Proverbs 31 woman, her husband is known in the gates because of the activities of his wife and her noble character. Her noble character have impacted her husband's reputation. And so I was just like, wow, even seeing Ruth's characteristic and how it's not just in what she says, but in what she does, her actions, right? And people see that, and they point that out in her. And then in verse 12, Boaz says, the Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, right? Because she came to follow Naomi's God, the God of Israel, and sought to take refuge in the Lord. And then the way she responds, I love it. She says, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. Even her response, right? It made me ask myself, even as a wife, right? Of course, our language today is different, right? I don't say, my Lord, thank you to Sean, but the heart behind it, right? Just examining my heart. Am I always showing my husband, my dear husband, my beloved husband, that I respect him, that I love him, that I appreciate him? Just the humility behind it, you know what I mean? Even though the customs are different, we don't say my Lord when they walk in, but the respect, the reverence that we have for them, do we have that respect for them? Because I know that the world is the opposite. Like, oh, you don't gotta respect your husband. That's what we're taught in the world. Like, oh, you don't gotta respect him, he gotta respect you, or da da da. And so after that, Naomi sees that the relationship between Boaz and Ruth, that she has won favor in Boaz's eyes, and she sees just, how they have had such a beautiful encounter, and how there's respect and kindness there. And so she instructs Ruth. And one of the study Bibles that I was reading, I love the way he puts it. He says, Naomi instructed Ruth to put on her best appearance and to propose a marriage to Boaz by utilizing an ancient Near Eastern custom. He points out, since Boaz was a generation older than Ruth, this overture would indicate Ruth's desire to marry Boaz, which the older gracious Boaz would not have initiated with a young woman. So Boaz was older. We know that he's older because he refers to her as my daughter, right? And so she, in the custom of that day, she showed that she was interested. And after she showed that she was interested, he pursued her. He did what he had to do, right? And so as you could read, and I encourage you to finish the whole book, but even after that, Boaz's response says, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, and that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman, right? Her reputation, right? They know by her actions that she is a worthy woman. Again, reminds us of the Proverbs 31 woman, right? And also I added here, even if we're already married, I want my characteristic to bless my husband. Are our reputations harming our husband? Or is it blessing our husband? I never want who I am to ruin him in any way. And so I know it's easy for us to say reputation, like who cares? Like God knows my heart. Yes, God does know our hearts. It's easy to say, oh, I'm Christian, I love God. But over time, your actions will show that. Like the Bible says in Matthew, what's in the heart comes out of the mouth. Who we are on the inside will show on the outside, right? And so, I just want us to examine ourselves. What is our reputation, right? Even if our reputation was so horrible in the past, I just pray that we will come to the Lord, cry out to Him to help us now, starting today. Help us to be women that He is pleased with. Not women that the world is pleased with, right? The women the world is pleased with will tell us the opposite. Don't respect your husband, or no, you don't have to do this or that, or all these things, right? But may we pray for the Lord to continue to mold us into women that He is pleased with, that we would be more humble, more gentle, more loyal, more respectful. May that be our desire. Yeah, I pray that this video ends up blessing someone. Thank you so much for pressing play. Please continue to pray for me as I grow in my knowledge of God, and may all that I say and do glorify Him, and always point back to Him and not to me or to anyone else or anything else, but to Him. So yeah, thank you so much. Bye.